Hello and welcome back for another episode of Stirring It Up with Tia Monique Kitchen Table Talk. And in today's political news segment, we have Madid Hassan speaking with Elizabeth Newman, talking about the new Republican Party and the threats that they pose.
Top national security advisor to President Donald Trump going on national television to declare that Trump won his election. It was stolen in a plot by the Chinese, Russian, and Venezuelan governments. And if the Supreme Court doesn't affirm him as the leader, he can declare martial law and force a revote. That was what convicted and then pardoned felon General Michael Flynn did just yesterday on Newsmax.
Within the swing states, if he wanted to, he could take military capabilities and he could place them in those states and basically rerun an election in each of those states. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I mean, these people out there talking about martial law, it's like it's something that we've never done. Martial law has been instituted 64 times.
It's unhinged, it's untrue, but it's undeniably gaining steam among armed and angry residents of MAGA-land. Politico reporting today that an increasing number of Trump supporters are calling for the outgoing president to make America great again by invoking the 1807 Insurrection Act to stay in power. Their evidence? Deficient reasoning Democrats illegally rigged the election and are attempting a coup, and Trump must send in the troops to undo this conspiracy. It's a gambit that's been suggested by Flynn, by his attorney and notorious former Trump election lawyer Sidney Powell, by the Georgia election lawyer who Trump loves to retweet, Lynn Wood, and by longtime Trump ally Roger Stone. You could dismiss this as mere talk. You could say these are insane ravings that nobody takes seriously, except that millions of Americans are taking it seriously, including extremists. Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, the largest right-wing militia group in the country, telling Trump in an open letter this week to launch war against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He writes, quote, "Do not concede, strike now. If you fail to act while you are still in office, we the people will have to fight a bloody civil war and revolution against these two illegitimate communist China puppets." The leader of the Proud Boys, who just last weekend turned protests violent in the nation's capital, reportedly telling his members in a now deleted YouTube video to infiltrate Biden's inauguration and cause mayhem. Quote, "Do whatever you got to get your tickets. You show up there in Biden gear. You kick off this presidency with fireworks." There are so many individual stories of violent right-wing extremism emerging in the US right now that they're easy to miss. Earlier this month, a federal jury convicting Michael Hari of coordinating the bombing of a mosque in Minnesota. Hari, a former sheriff's deputy and convicted kidnapper, ran an anti-government militia called the White Rabbits. And in 2017, the same year he bombed the mosque and an Illinois abortion clinic, he actually submitted a bid to win a federal contract for construction on Donald Trump's border wall. There's an old legend that a nightingale will never sing its song if it doesn't hear it first. But the moment it hears any part of another nightingale song, it sings as if it had known the song all the time. There may be no better metaphor for what Donald Trump has done with his bully pulpit since losing re-election last month. Just this week, the president tweeting, "They rigged the vote. Most corrupt election in US history. And we have just begun to fight." It is all nuts. But it is a symphony of mayhem and militancy heard and now repeated, sung out loud by millions of Americans. Thank you, Donald Trump. In 33 days, he will be an ex-president. But even if we were never to hear another peep, another tweet from him, and of course we will, his song continues to be an incitement to violence in our society. So, how worried should we be? Joining me now is Elizabeth Newman, former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention in the Trump administration, and now an outspoken critic of the president. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Should we be concerned about the prospect for violence in America going into 2021, especially based around these mad election conspiracies? Are you worried?
Thanks for having me, Maxine. Let me start with that and say, yes, I am worried. I've been worried. I continue to be worried. And honestly, I knew it would be bad, but I think many of us expected that there would be reasonable Republicans that would, eventually, after letting things play out, stand up and say, okay, enough. And you kind of saw that out of McConnell this week, but and do not understand why they are not grasping the gravity of the situation, that this is not about their maintaining their political power or kowtowing to their base. We have very evil people in the United States that would love to commit acts of attack, try to start a civil war. And then what they have been able to do in partnership with the president is bring some of that extremist mindset, that rhetoric, and that belief system into the mainstream of conservatism and the Republican Party. Now, that does not mean that everybody that believes that the election was a fraud and that Trump rightfully won is going to go out and commit an act of violence. But by expanding that pool of potential radical people, you are expanding the likelihood that we could see violence out of that larger pool of people.
So when we talk about the size of that pool of people, BuzzFeed's Rosie Gray had a long read today on how election-denying Trump supporters may form a new, more radical Tea Party. She cited supporters saying, quote, "I think the media should be punished," and, quote, "I'm not prepared to die for this country, but I would sure kill somebody." How many people could ultimately be radicalized to kill their fellow Americans by Donald Trump? Is there any way to quantify, you talk about that pool of people, the damage that's being done to people who were ordinary Republicans, quote unquote, perhaps, until a few years ago?
I was reading a book by Cynthia Miller-Idris, and she estimates that there are about 75,000 to 100,000 people in the United States that associate with extreme right-wing groups. Now, these are hardcore supporters that believe that their ideology is that we need to overthrow the U.S. government in some form or fashion, and that it is okay to kill people for the purpose of your ideology. So that's a pretty large number if you think about it in terms of if the U.S. government were to come out and say we think there are 100,000 ISIS supporters in the United States, that would sound alarm bells, right? So the concern that I have is with that, we started with a large number to begin with, and now you're moving more into the pool of millions of people that are angry right now that Trump is continuing to stir up. And now you have people like Michael Flynn and Eric Metaxas and even Rush Limbaugh, who eventually walked his statement back, but they're hinting at this idea that violence is justified, that this is a powder keg and it's only a matter of time. And I really hope that Republican leaders realize how dangerous this territory is and strongly condemn this. It needs to be condemned, and we need to help those that are not fully radicalized yet to walk back from that brink.
Isn't the problem, Elizabeth, that even when the condemnations come, they're belated, they're mild, they're mealy-mouthed? Today in Mother Jones, another former Assistant Department of Homeland Security Secretary who was in that role before you in the Democratic administration, Juliette Kayyem, said of Trump, and I quote, "He is promoting terrorism." George W. Bush administration official Corey Sheik called Trump, quote, "an arsonist of radicalization." Those are, I would argue, blunt but accurate descriptions. The last time you were on the show, you were equally direct, saying Trump is radicalizing Americans, inciting terrorism. How come we don't hear more people, even Democrats, even members of the liberal press, say this as bluntly as it needs to be said? Why is this simple truth considered beyond the pale? Is it people feel uncomfortable making such an accusation against Trump, even when the evidence is there to support it?
I do think it's hard in such a politically toxic environment. People tend to be careful with their words because they want to make sure they can that they're not just using words for political purposes. And the weird thing about Trump is that he is worthy of those extreme labels, and he is worthy of that condemnation. It isn't hyperbole to say that he's inciting and radicalizing people. There is documented evidence in the courts. ABC News did a great study and showed that I think it was as of May of this year, there are over 60 cases of people that commit hate crimes and planned terrorist plots, and they cited Donald Trump as the reason for, or association with his ideology as the reason for what they did. And importantly, they compared it to Obama and Bush, and they couldn't find anybody that had been arrested and had in their court filings anything to reference those presidents. So this is a very specific phenomenon to Trump, and I can't get into Republicans' mindset. I really think most of them think this is politics as usual, and that we'll get to Biden's presidency and we'll all go back to normal. No, we are nowhere near close to normal. We will be working to repair this for the next 10 to 20 years, and they need to get engaged and recognize the problem we have on our hands.
So on that point that you're making about the Republican Party and getting inside their minds, isn't the problem here that this isn't just about Donald J. Trump? This is the entire GOP that is now getting infected with this virus of violence and violent ideology. The FBI has designated QAnon, for example, as a domestic terror threat because of its potential to incite extremist violence. And yet 2 QAnon supporters are now in Congress, and one of them, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is being invited to stump for David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler in their Georgia Senate runoffs. Listen to what Greene told NBC reporter when he asked her about QAnon on the campaign trail last week.
Going back to what they were saying about QAnon, that's the connection that they're making. I'm just saying,
right.
How are you
I'll
going to deal
never
with
apologize
who are
for looking up other information. I have no apology there. And for anyone that wants to claim violence towards these people, the real violence happened with Antifa and Marxist BLM.
If the Republican Party in Congress is willing to embrace people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, what hope is there for the Republican Party?
You know, I don't know that there's hope. I spend a good deal of time, especially after the election, wondering what I am now. Where do I belong? I don't think I have a political home. But more importantly, it's not about me. It's where does conservatism go? Because I don't think that the majority of the Republicans, if you were to sit down with them one-on-one and have conversations, I think the majority of people they don't want violence. They are scared. They've been fed a bunch of lies from some of their leaders and from the conservative infotainment that is fed into this mindset that somehow that their lives are going to be disrupted if Joe Biden becomes president. But I think if they were exposed to facts and you reason with them and introduce them to people that have different perspectives, and they learn they're nice people, they're kind of like me, and some of this is how do you break polarization, how do you break hate,
yes.
and it is through having those one-on-one conversations and connecting to people. And of course, in the middle of a pandemic, that's all the harder because we're sheltering in place, we're wearing masks, and we're kind of retreating into ourselves and online. So it's a work of a generation to fix a lot of this, but I do struggle from a party mindset. If nobody is going to stand up and push back against QAnon, push back against the hate, then I don't think that they deserve to be a major party in the United States. And I think the voters will eventually show that they will become increasingly a minority in this country.
Unfortunately, the system is set up whereby they can still win elections even if they're a minority. You mentioned Republicans standing up to this. There was this powerful moment, Elizabeth, earlier this month in Georgia when a Republican election official, Gabe Sterling, called out the threats of violence that he and his boss, the Secretary of State in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, and others have been getting from MAGA folks. Have a listen.
My boss, Secretary Raffensperger, his address is out there. They have people doing caravans in front of their house. They've had people come onto their property. Trisha, his wife of 40 years, is getting sexualized threats through her cell phone. It has to stop.
Worse. So it's cowardly and despicable, and I hope, I tend to be optimistic. I don't feel much optimism right now for conservatism, for the party, but I do hope that a younger generation will come to the scene and say, enough, you lied, and you did not stand up for the truth when you were supposed to, and that's what our call is. We may lose that fight, but in my mind, you fight for the right thing, even if you think you're going to lose in that fight. And that's why I've spoken out. It's why I continue to speak out, because it's too important for the soul of our country to have a major political party continue to lie and breed hate.
You're right, and we're glad you are speaking out, and I think you're right, it is going to be a generational struggle. Elizabeth Newman, thank you so much for your time. Isn't the problem, Elizabeth, that people like Gabe Sterling, it's great that he said that, but he didn't say anything when it wasn't Republicans being targeted. It's almost like Republicans have woken up to this monster that was created and unleashed on liberals or the left, and now it's being unleashed on them, or on you if you still call yourself a Republican, and it's almost too little too late to come out and condemn it now.
They are the party of cowards at this point. There's so few of them that were willing to step up and tell the truth. They look the other way, and then you have a group of them that just jumped on board the Trump train and have been perpetuating the lies, even though you know that they don't believe it. We have evidence on tape of them recognizing Trump for what he was years ago, but now they're his biggest.
All right, that does it for another episode of Stirring It Up with Tierra Monique. So let us know how you feel about this situation. Is the Republican Party morphing into something undescribable? Something that we haven't dealt with in America in maybe years or at all? Please let us know what you think in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to become a friend. Until next time, and there will be a next time. Bye.